Buddy, we're here with another episode from the Gut of the Greatness. And as always, I got greatness with us today. I have Mr. Carvin Eisen. But this brother is extraordinary story to tell. He is a filmmaker extraordinaire, has told some amazing stories and continues to do that and continues to want to spread messages through the arts of TV, media, and film. He's going to talk about himself in a minute, as we always do. And I'm going to ask him our famous starting questions, as we get started today. Brother Eisen here, Brother Carvin Eisen. Thank you for coming on. We always start with the two questions. Tell us about what do you do and why should anybody care? Why does anybody care what you do? Give it to us raw, my brother.
All right. First of all, Dr. Miller, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. And it's a privilege and an honor to be able to talk about things that are important, to address issues that are important in the hopes that someone else will see them and it will resonate in some way, hopefully in a positive way. So I'm delighted to be here. And just to get it straight, the correct pronunciation of my last name is Eisen.
Sorry.
E is Eisen, but that's all good. So I have been so fortunate in my life up to now. I mean, really, really fortunate. I would have thought things might have gone differently. I might have got here a lot quicker, but as men of color, sometimes the road is more difficult for us, but that's no excuse. I'm living a dream life in the sense that I basically do what I want to do. And because I chose that path, it is more challenging. It is way more challenging. I happen to be the general manager of Rochester Community Media today. That's what I do. We're in the process of trying to transform our community media center into a educational facility for hopefully high school inner city youth, mostly boys, I'm hoping. But not to leave out girls, but boys are in more of a crisis right now.
Right.
In addition to that, I am a professor in journalism, broadcasting, and public relations at SUNY Brockport, a position I've held for 33 years. And brother, I'm telling you, I'm trying to retire. I'm trying my best to retire, but the work isn't done yet, but I'm very, very close. As we're having this conversation, I was recently nominated for Distinguished University Professor, and that is an honor of
Congratulations.
Its magnitude. And I hope that I end my teaching career with that accolade. It will help me and help the community and the things I'd like to do afterwards. Now, finally, those two things I do, and they help, to make my life possible. But what I really do is that I am a filmmaker. I make films, and I have made films for the last, 50 years. I have made some kind of film or other, largely documentaries, but not exclusively. And it just so happens that this week is the 20th anniversary of a film that I made in Rochester called July 64. And it was premiered at the Dryden Theater on July 24th in 2004. And it's going to be shown in the next couple of days, or actually, hopefully on Monday, the 22nd, at the Dryden Theater again. So that's real symmetry. This is an important film because this is the first time anyone ever took a look at what happened in Rochester on July 24th, 25th, 26th in 1964 and tried to make some sense out of it from the perspective of the people who were most affected by it. People like David Gant and Constance Mitchell and a whole range of other people, Dr. Dr. Walter Cooper, Minister Franklin Florence. All of these people, they live this story. They know this story. So when they speak about this story 20 years later, and many of them have passed on now, when they talk about this, it is so electric because you know what they're telling you is the truth. So
Right.
that's what I do. And I'd like to say I don't care if anybody doesn't care, but we
Come
don't
on, we all want people to
yeah,
care.
yeah, we don't make films so that people won't watch them. We
Right,
make
right.
films because we want to affect change, or we want to tell a story. So we told that story and many other stories. I've been so fortunate. I'm working on a big story right now. So that's basically that's my also I have to say I'm a father. My children, Ebony, Shona, Ivory, and Theron. Uh, I am also a husband, Ghislaine, and who happens to be in France right now. And I'm not complaining. I'm very, very fortunate, very fortunate. I hope I can keep going. I think I tell people I'm 72. A lot of people say, "Oh, you couldn't possibly be 72," but I am every bit of it, every bit of it, and I still have more work to do. So I'm hoping that I could uh, keep going. I can survive, because I think the best for me is yet to come. I think I have work to do that's going to have much more impact. So
No,
that's my story.
I would agree, and I thank you for the work that you do and that you're doing to get the stories out there. Um, Now, with that being said, um, one thing I'm really interested in, that I believe that especially in our generations that are prevalent today, a lot of generations aren't necessarily worried or concerned to the history of things, or what happened when, and everything about what's happening right now. So what's interesting to me is, could you tell my audience here a little bit more about what happened in 1964, and why should that be important today? Like, why should anybody care that of something that happened in 1964, and how is that prevalent, and how has it affected this community even to this day?
Dr. Paul, that is such a critical question. It's a critical question because really what happened in 64 was set into motion in the 1930s,
Okay,
when organizations like ESL, Eastman Savings and Loan, and I'm going to say names.
that's a bank, y'all.
Yeah,
For everybody, yep. There you
yeah, I'm
go.
going to say names. The Monroe County Legislature, the Arundecoit City Council, the Federal Realtors Association, all of these organizations and many other organizations conspired to create the Rochester physically that we have right now. They conspired. Wegmans Corporation, right? The great supermarket on the East Coast. Wegmans, all of these organizations conspired because they wanted to shape the community that we have. That's a very little known, poorly known story, but it's documented in a film that I made more recently called Home Access Denied. And it basically addresses how that happened, because home access denied is actually the story that comes before July 64. July 64 and the so-called riot is a result of systematic oppression and social organization that forced certain people that look like us, to live in one neighborhood, and other people to live in other neighborhoods like Meadowbrook or Pittsford or any of the surrounding suburban areas, right? So all of that was set into motion because they didn't want people of color living in the community unless they were servants, unless they were maids, unless they were support people. They had homes. You couldn't buy a home at that time if you were a person of color, because they had covenants on them that said that this home could never be sold to a person of color. It's in the deed of the home. So my little film, Home Access Denied, talks about that. And it is the precursor, although I didn't know this at the time when Chris and I made July 64, that's the precursor that set things into motion in July 64. Now, what happened in July of 64 was extraordinarily interesting, and it is a microcosm for what happened in this nation. This is why the film has done so well, because documentaries, unless you're Earl Morris or Ken Burns or Michael Moore, a big documentary maker, documentaries don't have legs. They just, people aren't interested in looking at that format. But this film is done extraordinarily well, has been in demand. It's in many libraries across the country, academic libraries and community centers, etc., because it tells the story that is uniquely American, the story about oppression, the story about the influx of immigrants, Black immigrants coming from agricultural backgrounds, agrarian backgrounds, coming to Rochester, which was a high-tech center. Rochester was the Silicon Valley of its day. There were more millionaires in Monroe County per capita than any other place in the world, in the country. There were great companies like Kodak and Xerox and Cybron and Harris and many other high-tech companies.
Bosch Alam.
Bosch Alam, absolutely. So people were coming here, right? Historical migration patterns. They were leaving the South because of excessively racialized living, lynching, etc. You know, just really demeaning situations, demeaning perspectives. And they came to Rochester looking for a better life. But when they got here, they did not have a better life. They couldn't get employed. They couldn't find housing. And the housing that they did find was very dilapidated and substandard and aggressive policing. I mean, aggressive policing. And it's not me saying this. This is what people like Daryl Porter and many other people who are in the film, David Gant, who was, if the film has a patron saint, it would have been Representative David Gant, Assemblyman David Gant, because he got us the money to make the film. So that's essentially what happened. And what happened on the night of July 24, 25, and 26 in 1964 was the result of years of oppression, years of, Minister Florence tells a story that he was in a Sunday morning service in his church, and the police came in with gun, cap, and dog to an 11 o'clock Sunday morning service, right? There's so many stories like that. So one night.
Right. What you going to do with all that and coming into church at a service, right?
Exactly. So all of that just led to, and this usually happens, this happens all over the world when there is oppression. This has happened everywhere where people feel that there's no recourse. And one night, it was a hot night in July, and a match is lit, so to speak, and all hell broke loose. And this was the first time the National Guard had to be called out in a northern city above the Mason-Dixon line. All kinds of attention was focused on this. Nobody could believe this was happening because the white city fathers thought that they were so benevolent and that, you know, they were doing good by their underclass, right? They were doing the best they could. They were moving quickly. They had just developed public housing, but people were fed up and they wanted change. And it was rough. I wasn't here. I was only 11 years old, but it was rough. So that's why.
Carvin, when I hear that, I think about that we have so many, it brings up so many thoughts and so many emotions, because the companies that you're naming are all companies that heavily accept Black and brown folks' money within this community. So the Wegmans of the world, the ESNLs. And so what I hear you saying is that there was a plan. And I'm assuming that because you're saying it, that this is well documented and that you have facts to back it up.
Oh, yes, it's well documented. It's not just me saying this. It would be irresponsible of me to say this without the proper documentation to back it up. We have the records. It's in the film, my little film, Home Access Denied. You can find it on YouTube. It is verifiable. But
Right.
now on the other side, you have ESL, Eastman Savings and Loan now, which is trying their best to, I won't say reparations, but they're trying to provide monies for nonprofit organizations, to show good faith and to help, individuals and organizations to read.
I agree. They do, for the record, everybody, they do work tirelessly with the community now to try to rectify or behave differently and make sure that the disadvantaged folks get supported better or differently. And they do a lot of that type of community work. And so do some of the other organizations. But still, the fact remains that they all contrived together to create a Rochester, which is today. And if you look at the way Rochester is today, Rochester is one of the third poorest cities in the country, lowest education rates in the state and almost in the country. You name it, and there's highest murder rates per capita. And it was all designed to put people in poverty and to live in the same area on top of each other, and to potentially use the dysfunction of poverty to keep each other right where you're at. And that's really what we have. And now I got this brother here, Carvin Eisen. Did I say it right this time?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. I got Carvin telling us that it's a documented facts that the companies and powers that be, the systematic controls, did that to purposely make this happen, and it actually has happened. And so when you think about that, Carvin, like, what is our roles and responsibility in this? And I know this is a loaded question, but from your perspective as someone who's lived for a little while and who documents these things on film, how do we as a people change it? What do we need to do differently? And then we're gonna get into your story in a few minutes. But how do we do this differently?
Well, I feel, this is my perspective, I feel that it's so important because people don't understand this. People think, oh, well, they live on Joseph Avenue, Hudson, in poverty because they want to, right? They could leave and they could go do something else, but it's way more complicated than that. They have designed, and this is the important thing, the way to say it. It is a collaboration between government, private business, right, colluded to create the circumstances that we have today. And the other critical factor is that they benefit from that by that construction, by creating those impediments for development within the Black community, Black and Brown communities. They set into motion structures that they benefit from. They build wealth. They generate income for their families and their future families. So when you start to measure income rates and wealth development over a generation, then you see the real problem. That's how serious it is. It's one thing to say there are income disparities, but when you see that it's set into motion and the people that live, let's say, in Meadowbrook or Pittsford, they benefit from the very same things that disenfranchise communities of color. And when you start to talk about it, they will acknowledge it. But do you think that they would change? Do you think that they would say now, okay, well, we recognize that we benefited from this, but will they do anything to change the circumstances? That's where we have the problem.
And that's definitely a problem. Yeah. But, to me, part of the problem is, and this is why, I like to do this show From the Gutter to Greatness, right, is because there's these systemic problems that are out there that that need to change, and that we all can work together to try to change. And I believe that has to happen. And I believe, you know, as long as we keep fighting, there's elements of change that happen. But what I really believe, Carvin, is that to change the systems and powers that be is extremely difficult. And I say the first changes often start with us, right? And the first changes that I can control is me. And the first change that Carvin can control is him. And so when I think of change in that manner, I think of Rochester, right? And I think of Rochester and the folks who have been dealt this crappy hand. Because I was one of these folks. Like I grew up in one of the worst areas that they put together for us, right? So you know, and I'm always going to be that in my heart, because I never forget where I'm from. But I always want to elevate and change my mindset to grow and to move from my gutter to greatness, and be able to change that. And see, a lot of our folks are stuck in that gutter mentality and don't want to move to their greatness. And so I would say at some point in time, even though the system dealt some crappy hands, a lot of our folks aren't playing the right cards, and they're not playing the hands that they got dealt the right way, and aren't willing or interested in changing it, and just continue this cycle of doing exactly what the systems wanted us to do, which is keep each other down. And I just hope that we can change as a people, but start as individuals first. So what's your take on that? How do you feel about that? And you know, because I know it's a systemic issue too. I don't deny that for a minute.
Well, it's systemic in the sense that it sets the boundary, it sets the conversation, in it sets the context that people see themselves in. Therefore, they don't see themselves outside of that. And so they don't try to get outside of that. They replicate what they see. So if you notice, I have on one of my Frederick Douglass t-shirts.
Yes, which I like.
And I have a very extraordinarily beautiful relationship with Frederick Douglass. One of the things that I did, I was the driving force project director behind the Re-Energize the Legacy of Frederick Douglass, which put 14 monuments, life-size monuments of Frederick Douglass on the streets of Rochester. Ultimately, it resulted in a bronze monument at the airport, which I am so proud of. I feel like I did something of value. It will be there forever. They could never take it out of the airport. It's
now, didn't the Daniels work on that too? Michelle Daniels and her husband as well. I can't think of the husband's name.
Not the monument. They didn't work on the monument. She has a mural that's in the airport.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, the monument is my project. I raised the money. It took federal dollars, state dollars. It's vetted by the community. It is a very beautiful thing made by local artist Olivia Kim. She's a genius. So in fact, I should have realized I have a little bronze one about this big. It's in my car. I should have brought it in here just to show it to people, because it's so.
Help people to understand the significance of that, because people again may not know for historical reasons. What's the significance of Frederick Douglass in Rochester, and significance of placing the monuments throughout Rochester? Like why again, for people who aren't up on their history, why the hell does that matter?
Okay, this was the point, is that once I started to understand who Frederick Douglass was, right? I had no concept. I went to a graduate school that was based on photography, the visual studies workshop. Frederick Douglass's name never came up in the whole time, 4 years I'm at the school, right here in Rochester, right? Frederick Douglass did so much for people of color. He carefully curated his image. He wanted to be seen a certain way. Once you understand where Frederick Douglass is coming from, where he came from, here was a man who was born into enslavement, but he never had the mentality of a slave. He never called himself a slave. He was enslaved, but he wasn't a slave. And that is a critical difference, right? a mentality. If you don't see yourself as a slave, you will never be treated like a slave.
Oh,
You will
I,
do what you need to do
wait,
to
we got to capture that again, man. I need you to say that again because say it again because, and the reason why I'm gonna ask you to say it again because I need people to hear this. I need them to hear the power behind that because there's so much power and beauty behind that. Because even though all these things that we just said Rochester is and things that we've been given, now those same things exist outside of Rochester in the rest of this country as well. But if you allow yourself to be a slave to it and stuck in it, you're going to be a product of it. This man, Frederick Douglass, didn't allow himself to do that. And he rose to greatness because he chose to look at it differently. So now I'm going to ask you to say it again and continue telling us because I need people to understand the power behind that.
Well, he refused to see himself as a slave. He refused to be defined as a slave, and therefore he could not be a slave. So he used his life and his intellect. He taught himself to read. Frederick Douglass was to social media in his day what TikTok and Instagram and all the social media platforms, Twitter, X, all that is today. He wrote books at a time when it was unbelievable, it was unheard of a Black person writing an autobiography. It was just unheard of. So he took charge of his life. He took responsibility for his life. And he had an impact on the city of Rochester that lasts until this day. And when he passed away, he's buried in Mount Hope Cemetery along with his family. When he passed away, and they erected a monument, the Stanley Edwards Monument in Highland Park. It's there right now. We recently moved it to its prominent place at the corner of South Avenue, Clinton Avenue, and I forget the name of the little side street. But Frederick Douglass, when the mayor of Rochester, George Warner, said that Frederick Douglass was Rochester's most illustrious citizen, they wanted the monument, and it was for a long period of his life at the train station, which was the main portal to the city of Rochester. So he wanted all residents to know, people traveling in and out of Rochester, that in fact the number one citizen happened to be a Black man. And so by us putting that monument in the airport, it's sort of some symmetry because that's the main portal now. And that monument they can never take it out of the airport, no matter what happens. So in 100 years, my great grandchildren and whoever, assuming that our culture survives, and there's some things going on that, we'll talk about that at another time, that question if the viability of our culture as it stands right now, the values that hold this country together. But Frederick Douglass just refused to see himself as a person who was a slave. And because of that, he carried himself a certain way. He demanded that his image be presented a certain way. He wrote so that other people would understand those ideas. Nobody could believe that he was enslaved because he wrote and spoke so eloquently, right? So he set his own predicate. And then it's also important, Dr. Paul, to understand that at that time, Rochester, New York, and Monroe County was a hotbed of social justice, right? Now, we are in the early 20th century, we became known for business and Kodak and, making a lot of money. Right. But historically, it was social justice. Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, women's suffrage. These were the big issues of the day, and Rochester was in the forefront of that. But along comes George Eastman, along comes this idea that we need to make money, and we move from our social justice predicate to a completely different mindset, right? Because photography becomes king. Image making in this community becomes king. So that's sort of, the value of Frederick Douglass. And we put those monuments on the street because we wanted to take Frederick Douglass down off this pedestal that many white Americans, and I'm not saying this as a negative, they have him on this pedestal, and they want you to revere him from that perspective, and we revere him. But Frederick Douglass was an activist, so we wanted to take him off that pedestal and put him on the street at street level and ask questions like, what would Frederick Douglass say about the fact that there have been 3 Black mayors in Rochester, and one of them is a woman, right? One of the current mayor is Black. In Frederick Douglass' day, that was unimaginable that that would happen. So what would he would say about that? What would he say about the state of our school system here in Rochester? What would he say about the fact that the number 429, there are 429 school districts, that the number 1 school district and the number 429 school district are 10 minutes away from each other?
Well, yeah, well, 646 in the state.
There's 646 now?
Yeah, there's 646, and Rochester is 646 out of 646.
Well, there you go.
And on top of that, so, you know, now that we're talking about it, what would Frederick Douglass say about having a Black mayor who doesn't always align with what our population, our Black folks need, and that he's more interested in the business and the money of the city? And that's just, now this is my perspective rather than the larger population. But, you know, I wish our Black mayor would get in tune with what Frederick Douglass would want and what his Black constituents want, rather than what he can do to stay in office. That's just my perspective. We can always debate that or have a conversation, though.
I'll just say this, that because of Mayor Evans, they bought our, when the project was over, the monuments were designed to be on the street for 3 years, and they were on the street for like 5 years, and they were deteriorating, and there was a lot of vandalism. But I will say, to the mayor's credit, and I thank him for this, they bought them and they're refurbishing them, and they're going to put them in places that are significant and important. So another legacy from the project that we did, and I'm very excited about that.
And, you know,
those things really mean
absolutely something. And I will say kudos and congratulations. And I'm never about bashing somebody. I'm always about wanting to respect and uplift. But I will say that if he made a move that was good and good for the city, you know, congratulations. I wish that he would continue and do more of that.
Well, I will say this, I think that there are other places where the mayor might align with us. I think that he is very concerned about the deplorable state of education in the city school district of Rochester, and would like to see improvement, right? We, you know, it's not, we're not speaking out of school to talk about these are the concerns that you and I have. We would like to see improvement in the educational system.
Absolutely.
Community. This is what I am working toward. It is shocking to me that there is no school that focuses 100% on media literacy education. Media is as critical to development as any dimension of our life. They have a school for the arts. It's wonderful. It flourishes. Students, it's a magnet from all over the county. Students come there. There needs to be a school that looks at, that talks about broadcast performance in front of the camera and behind the camera. That's workforce development. That deals with writing, because writing is the key to everything. And you know, as a doctor, you don't get there unless you can write.
I had to learn how to write. I didn't write well, but I had to learn how to write.
And that's the key to it. Is writing, and then broadcast performance and gaming and game design and social media. So this is Mayor Evans shares our regard, shares our passion with regard to education, because
I'm gonna have to argue with you on this one. We're gonna have to debate it and debate his true want for education to change, because anytime you bring up the conversation of charter schools with Mayor Evans takes the perspective where he's very, very careful, and his voter constituency He's heavily supported through certain unions and through certain other areas. So he often, if it's not aligned, he won't speak up and speak for what's right. And so that really bothers me about this brother, because he knows that it's not going right. He's from this community. He knows about the education system. Shoot, his sister was one of my students. So I've known this brother for a long time. I know his family, and it just bothers me that he won't speak up more, or willing to put some of the city's money or other things in the areas that would helpfully potentially change that. And that being not the only way, but one of the ways is charter schools. Like, that the city, it's a pass through. The city gives the school district $120 million, right? And so it comes from the state, comes to the city, and the city just is a pass through, goes to the state school district, $120 million. The charter schools see none of that money, see absolutely $0 from that 120 million. Yet he has 8,500 kids in charter schools, and he has, and there's no argument, or there's no fight to try to do something different, because if now about 30 to maybe even 35% of the kids in his city are being serviced by charter schools, shouldn't 30 to 35% of that funding go to the schools? Because again, these are our kids. These are our kids in the community, and the schools are outperforming. He won't speak up for that.
Well, I can't disagree with you on that. And I always thought that the formula was that the dollars follow the students. So if the students, go to charter school, then those dollars, then the charter school in effect becomes a public school, and the funding has to go with them. But I will say this, that I talked to Mayor Evans about Rochester Community Media, and I said the same thing that I just said to you about the idea, the need for a school that focuses on media literacy.
Right.
And he asked me to come with him, although we haven't gone yet, to a school board meeting and tell them the very same thing that you and I are talking about now. Right. I think that there are a lot of other dysfunctions with that organization, and I just, my end goal is this. I don't get into the politics of it.
Right. No, I understand, and I'm not trying to crush your relationship with the mayor.
No, I'm a horrible politician in that regard, because I just like to get stuff done. We want to improve and I think if we could use Rochester Community Media, which is a television station, a radio station, and a community center, if we can use that as a nucleus for a foundation to build a school on top of that, to target young people within the city, I think we could do something of real significant value. And I've always been like this, Dr. Paul. Let me just say this last thing. I've always been like this. A lot of people say, well, I want to make a film, or I want to do this, I want to do that. But I can't get the money. I'm not going to be able to get the money to do it. So I can't do it until I get the money. I have never taken that position. My position is I do it, and the money catches up with the project in everything I've ever done, because I am serious about doing that. The project brings the money to it that it needs in order to get done. Almost every film that I have ever worked on, with the exception of Home Access Denied, follows that formula. Working on a film now on the Planetarium Dome, same formula. That people like the idea, we're going to find the money because the idea is brilliant. So I think that to button up the school thing, I think that the things that we've been talking about, and I've been talking about with others, we're going in that direction. And I believe you lead, you follow, or you get out of the way. And we're leading. This is where, when we talk about to greatness, we're leading. And that's where we're going. So
no, absolutely. And I definitely look at you as a leader in this, and the fact that you want to create this for young people is amazing and awesome. And the truth behind it, Carvin, is I really don't care how it gets created, as long as it gets created. So if the district wants to help create this school, amen, hallelujah. Now, what I will also say is that most things that they create doesn't go too well. And so I would say independently creating a charter school for the media arts would probably give autonomy to create a school that's amazing, that could last for a long time if it's created right. So I would humbly tell or say to Mayor Evans, like, get behind and supporting, not necessarily going to the board to ask for permission, but start creating the plan to actually create our own school that would be the community school of media arts, and that would be a charter school that's still public. And the dollars, they do follow the child, but only a certain percentage of it. And that's additional money that doesn't follow the child. So that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I'm telling Mayor Evans, come on, man, get behind it, support. So, but so you know, moving to
well, we're on the same page. The most important thing is that we're on the same page,
right?
Because success will have 1,000 mothers and fathers.
Absolutely. I don't care how we get there. Let's get there.
Let's get there.
Let's make it happen.
I think you're right. It's about money. It's because the city school district's budget is twice that of the city of Rochester. That's really the bottom line on it.
Absolutely. But you know, you typically, I wouldn't go to somebody who I know isn't going to help create my vision in the right way. You know, if I know somebody has a history of doing something wrong, if 4 + 4 is 16 with them, I want to go to somebody that knows 4 + 4 is 8. So
it's important to put it in context.
Yeah.
Because Rochester Community Media exists because of the franchise agreement between the city of Rochester and the cable provider.
Okay.
So we have historically had a relationship with the city for a very long time. I have administered that relationship for 20 years. So we have a relationship with them.
That partnership is important.
We have a partnership. So it's logical to appeal to them, but we're not bound to them. And they know, but you know, but they've been, as far as assisting to keep community media cogent and viable. They were very, very supportive in terms of building renovation projects that we're embarking on now. So it's logical, but they're not. I can say it in a public forum like this. They're not binding us from doing anything.
Good.
We feel that the better, more successful, a more potential relationship is with charter schools. That's where we're going. Right. And we've had these conversations. I've talked with you, Joe Klein. I'm talking with others. I hope to be talking with other people. We're moving ahead because we can't waste another generation of kids while adults are bickering over money. We can't do that. Right. Because it's a built-in entrenched set of interests. Everybody benefits from the dysfunctionality. The teachers board, the teachers union benefits. They keep everything the status quo. Everything stays the same because it's a money trail. It's a money construct. So anyway, I think that we're on the right page. And again, when things happen positively, everybody's going to be like, oh, we're part of that. We did that. We made that happen. But
definitely, you know, and as I move on to talk about trending topics kind of quickly, the time, because we didn't even get into your story yet, which is important, and we only got an hour because this has been a history lesson, which is beautiful and great, and I think that we need this, and I think there's been a rich dialogue and information that I'm appreciative of. So thank you for everything that you've shared thus far, and you know, specifically around the Frederick Douglass and the riots and on those topics, you know, just as a trending topic, something that's going on currently. I always like to come back to trending topics. Trump, there was an attempted assassination. It was the first assassination in a long time, in many, many years, they said. The young man missed by a few inches. I think he turned his head, and because he talks with his hands and he moves his head, it grazed his ear, missed by a few inches. So for whatever reason, God kept this man alive. And you know, there must be something that God wants for this man, and it kept him alive. And it wasn't his, or maybe it just wasn't his time to go yet. And it's lucky, because I never, in the personal aspect of it, regardless of my politics, I never want to see anybody assassinated over their politics or killed or hurt behind, you know, their politics. But you know, I'd love to hear what's your take on this. And just as I give you my quick take, the thing that really, really bothered me about all this was that it happened. First of all, that shouldn't happen to any president or anybody, and the fact that there's people out there that want to hurt people because of their perspective, that's a real problem. The second thing that I really have a problem with is that Trump used this as to show us a force of strength. And so one of the things that he did that was very evident is he used his symbol of Hail Hitler as right after this happened. And that, that what does that really mean? And what does that really say when he decides to Hail Hitler or decides to use that symbol after he escaped his near brush with death? And this is the man who will probably most likely be elected again based on the way things are going right now. I just have some real issues here, my brother. What's your take on all this?
This is as far as our country and our democracy, our representative democracy is concerned. This is a very important thing, what happened. And I'm not ready to buy it the way that it's being presented.
I think he set it up personally.
I'm not ready to buy how this is being discussed. Right. I'm not ready to swallow what they're feeding us, because this whole conversation now is changing. Right now, they're talking about this guy as if he doesn't have a history of some of the most divisive, demeaning, racist, misogynist behavior of any person in public life, and he gets away with it. This man is a felon. He is a convicted felon. And if you and I did anything what he did, we would not be accorded the same excuses and the same consideration. We would never get a job, right? I would not go back to Brockport because I'm a convicted felon, but he gets away with it, right? So right. I'm very worried about that. I'm not buying what happened in the way that it's being sold. I need to see more evidence. They raise him up. My understanding, the Secret Service, they're supposed to protect him. They're supposed to move him out. We never should have seen his face. They stopped so that they could take photographs, carefully composed photographs. And I work in this medium. I know what those images mean, that he is automatically triumphing over the circumstances that he's in. They start chanting USA. The Secret Service person stops them, and then they come on for the photo op. Then they go on, right? Now the news media that was critical of him is thinking about him in a different way. I grew up with when I was 11 years old, I saw JFK in a motorcade, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, going down Broadway Street in Buffalo, New York. And Dr. Paul, it was as if he stopped his motorcade and looked directly at me. I had that kind of, it impacted me in such a way as an 11-year-old to see the president. So this man was assassinated, and to say that, everybody comes out and said, this isn't the American way, you shouldn't do this. This is very much the American way. This is the American way. When people don't like something, they will use political violence. There's a history of violence toward men, primarily Black people, but men of color, primarily Black men, to take them out because they were the most vocal. They were the most responsive to the circumstances that they were in, right? So I'm not ready to swallow this the way that it's being presented, because I personally don't think that, if you read, and I've tried to get the book, I can't get it. It's beyond print, but there's a book called Project 25 that was created by the Heritage Foundation, of which more than 100 of the authors of it were in his administration. He was taking some damage on that before this so-called assassination attempt. And now the conversation is completely changed. The conversation changed from Joe Biden's poor performance in the debate, right? So what probably there are going to be more things that happen between now and Election Day, but this one looks really, really bad.
Is she right? So
justifying him.
So I see this as very fishy. I
Yeah,
see this as very contrived, and I wonder how much this young man, because he was a Republican as well.
yeah,
I wonder how much this young man was paid and his family was paid to give his life for this,
yeah,
and not only at the end of the day made this decision to now help change the imagery. And we got to go on, but
yeah,
we're the same breath that
yeah.
it just doesn't seem right and it
No,
doesn't seem real.
I'm not
Um,
buying it.
but
I'm
you
not.
know, and now I didn't even ask you this question yet, so I'm going to give you about 3 to 4 minutes and I know that telling your story in 3 to 4 minutes, there's no justice to it because you have lived such a rich life and a full life. But can you tell us your gut of the greatness story in about 3 to 4 minutes of like where you started, where you grew up at, how you grew up, um, and really how did you like what were your struggles and how did you start to make a shift into the man that you are today?
Well, I'm gonna position it in the way that I perceive that Frederick Douglass was positioning it. Of course, I was born uh, to a family, and we were poor, just like everybody else. I never perceived it that we were in any way even the idea of poor, because everybody we associated with and the church and everybody was the same. So I never perceived it that way, uh, that I was in any kind of circumstances that would be defined as a gutter. What I saw it as is that the people that were responsible for raising me, I suppose the most difficult moment in my life happened when I was 5 years old and I lost my mother.
Mm,
That had a profound effect on me, and
absolutely.
it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I met with my brother yesterday, and he has not come to terms with it yet. He was 4 years old. So I think that that was the hard thing. But here's what happened. The people that were responsible for me, my grandmothers and the people that raised me, they loved me. That was the antidote to the whole thing. They
Mhm.
loved me and they said, Carvin, they invested something in me. You know what I'm saying? They told me that I was going to be successful. They told me that. I had so I never heard a different story that you weren't going to be. That's why it was shocking to me when I go for grants, or when I was in the coming up in the university system as a teacher, and these people would be treating me badly. It was a shock to me because I didn't understand it. Now, of course, I understand it because even in a state school, right? This is not Harvard or Yale or some Ivy League Stanford school or something. This is a state school. It's cutthroat. It's cutthroat, and racism drives the whole thing. You are not wanted. That's what they tell you. And it's the same thing that we see for the young ones that we're responsible for. They're told they're not wanted, right? Young Black boys, and you know this as an educator, the thing that they bring to the table, their physical prowess, their beauty with language, their inventiveness with language, to create a new language, to assign meaning to words in a way that is not traditional, that does not follow the Queen's English, right? That's brilliant. But what they get told, instead of their teachers recognizing that creativity, that imagination, they are told that what they bring to the table naturally is not wanted, because they won't deliver it the way that the teachers, who are mostly white women, want it to be delivered. So what they bring naturally there is not wanted. So my experience in rising up through the university system and now being on the precipice of distinguished university professor, they did not want what I brought to the table naturally. They didn't want it because they don't want Black people there, right? It's
Mhm.
better now. It's better. I survived it. It's better. But that is the paradigm in everything that we do as people of color, whether it is in education, whether it's housing, healthcare, entertainment, employment. There is always a challenge that what we bring to the table is not wanted. So that's my story. It was just like, well, I'm going to be at this table. It might take longer. It might not be the way that it happens for, the way that people with far less talent, but the currency of their skin gives them entree to things that are much more difficult for us to do. We may have greater bank accounts. We may have traveled the world more. We have higher education, but the currency of that skin is the driver of this culture. And this is why any Black person that tells me that they support Trump, especially young Black men, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I can't tell you who to support, but Trump took out a full page ad in the New York Times to calling for the death penalty for 5 innocent boys. And he never recanted. He's never apologized for that now. At the end of the first Trump administration, they executed more Black men that he could have exonerated, he could have pardoned. They executed between the election of Biden, a president-elect, and the Trump leaving, more Black men were executed under Trump. So I don't want to hear about Trump.
No, I have to agree with you. I'm not a Biden fan either, but I can't vote for Trump. And what I would ask you is, and I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds, so you got to make it really brief.
Yeah,
to say 3 things. If you had to give somebody 3 key points to shift from their gutter to their greatness, to move from where they are to where they need to be, what would those 3 key points? And you got to keep them real brief and succinct.
I'm gonna be brief. Be brief, brother. Be brief.
There you go.
Number 1, don't accept the circumstances that you're in. Just simply don't accept it. You need something more than what you bring to the table. Be inquisitive. Look around you. Where are you? Look at the world that you're in and aspire toward the thing that you want to be. Number 2, this is really, really important. This is really important. People will assist you. You will be with people. You will place yourself in the context of people that will help you. Because it's not because of me. It's because people said, Carvin, you're better than that. Carvin, you can do better than what you think you can do. And I did, because they said that to me, because they cared about me. And then number 3, the last one I think is the most important, is go back and help somebody else. Help somebody else. Help. This is why this school is so important. I would like to assist others through the only viable route that we have is through education. People, either you are some mega talent and you're like Michael Jackson or some big talent, and you got, and even that, if you don't manage that talent, it will destroy you, as was happened to him. So if you don't have that mega talent, then education is the only way that we know. So education, self-awareness, right? Working with others, people that love you and support you and that will tell you the truth, and then help other people. That's the only way. There's nothing else.
I want to thank you so much for taking your time to be a guest today, from the gutter to greatness. And, as I close out, I always close out with the mindfulness minute, and the minute's going to be a little shorter today, people. But, I want to, something that resonated with me that this brother said, Mr. Carvin Eisen, he said that Frederick Douglass believed that he wasn't a slave, so therefore he wasn't. So the fact that he believed that he wasn't what they said he was, gave him the ability to do something different. Now it's your choice to believe that you are not what they say you are and to do something different. And so that has been our show today, from the gutter to greatness. And until next time, I ask you to still work to be greater later.
That's it for today's episode. So head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing for a $25,000 private epic VIP day with Dr. Miller himself. Be sure to head on over to guttertogreatness.com and pick up a free copy of Dr. Miller's gift. And join us on the next episode.